Hello everybody, and a very, very warm welcome to the Portimão circuit here on the Algarve coast of Portugal for the second race of the second round of the 2013 International GT Open. My name is Ben Evans, and I'll be guiding you through the next 50 minutes of electrifying action around the undulations and elevations of the magnificent Autodromo do Algarve. Yesterday we saw a home victory for Miguel Ramos and Nicky Pastorelli. Will they make it in the double in the Corvette, or will we see somebody else come to the fore? Well, you saw briefly some highlights of what was an action-packed day yesterday, and the weather much the same today. Not a cloud to be seen in the sky. It's beautifully warm, and there is a nice large crowd assembled here ready to enjoy the action. Almost 30 cars lining up on the grid for this, the second race of the weekend. It's the shorter 50-minute race, and the action is going to be fast and frantic throughout. If you've never seen the International GT Open before, then a very warm welcome to you. To explain, there are two classes: the Super GT class, which is for cars which are broadly speaking running to GT2 specification, and the GTS class, which is for cars broadly speaking running to GT3 specification. Everybody must make a mandatory pit stop between 40% and 60% race distance. That's essentially from when the race is 20 minutes old to when it's 30 minutes old. And it is this man, yesterday's race winner, Nicky Pastorelli, who lines up in pole position. He and Miguel Ramos absolutely dominated proceedings in their V8 Racing Chevrolet Corvette. But I think today it's going to be a little bit harder for them, because lining up alongside them on the front row of the grid is the AF Course Ferrari of Matt Griffin. Griffin, who didn't race yesterday due to an incident in qualifying. So he has got a lot that he wants to prove today. A switch of teams as well for Griffin and his driving partner Duncan Cameron. Paul Ricard a fortnight ago, they were in the M-Tech Ferrari. They've moved across to AF Course and have immediately found themselves leaping towards the front of the field. I think they could really challenge Pastorelli in the Corvette. Onto the second row of the grid, and Diedrich Schittoff, who is running solo all weekend. He finished somewhere down the order yesterday, down about 14th position, so he will be looking for a slightly stronger run today. In the big Corvette, it's going to be hot work there inside the cockpit for him. And then alongside him on the second row of the grid is the first of the GTS cars, and that is Jan Seyfarth in the Seyfarth Mercedes. Fantastic gull-wing design, and the German driver in qualifying yesterday was very potent, and most importantly of all, given the heat and the consideration of how the controlled Dunlop slick tyre is going to work over the course today. Only did 3 laps in qualifying, and that was an old tyre, so he has got a couple of fresh tyres ready to be deployed when he needs them. The way that performance is equalised in the National GT Open as well, just to explain, is that the pit stop time is mandatory minimum of 70 seconds, but then based on cumulative success, you can get additional time added to your pit stops, which we'll discuss as the race goes on. Fifth on the grid, Roman Mavlanov, the former single-seater racer for the Renault, who has been looking in fine form all weekend. He was quick in the second half of yesterday's 70-minute race, and in qualifying yesterday, he was rightly delighted to be fifth on the grid, the second of the GTS runners. Alongside him on row 3 then is the Kessel Racing Ferrari of Stefano Gattuso, a former champion in the GTS class going back to the 2011 season. And Gattuso always can be relied on to perform strongly here. Marco Zanettini, you wouldn't be against them getting themselves onto the GTS, if not the overall race podium, over the course of the next 50 minutes or so. The heat haze shimmering off the cars on the grid. They make a magnificent sight, and this is what the International GT Open is all about. Dream cars are racing against each other. Well, yesterday it was Carlos Vieira and his co-driver Cesar Campanico who claimed third in the race overall, winning the GTS class as well in the Team Nova driver Audi R8, a car that is here this weekend as part of the Iberian GT Championship. And Campanico and Vieira have had considerable success in that championship over recent seasons. It was very pleasing to see them running so strongly up towards the sharp end of the field during yesterday's race. A race that was unfortunately a little bit interrupted because of various safety cars and the like. Alongside Vieira on the fourth row of the grid is his Nova driver teammate, Lourenco de Veiga, another home driver, Portuguese, looking to do well in front of his home crowd, who wait expectantly as the grid is pretty much clear now, and they are getting ready for the off. The very back of the grid, the car to watch for is going to be Andrea Montermini, who's driving single-handedly today in the Villorba Course Ferrari. His regular co-driver Luca Filippi is actually on television commentary duties at the Spanish Grand Prix. And you can just see at the very, very back of the grid, just peeking out there, Montermini in the Valour Course Ferrari, the car that won the second race of the season at Paul Ricard. So let's have a look then at how they line up in full. With the front row, Nicky Pastorelli and Matt Griffin, Corvette versus Ferrari. Row 2 of the grid is Corvette versus Mercedes, Diedrich Schitthoff and Jan Seyfarth. Seyfarth, the first of the GTS runners, and Roman Mavlanov and Stefano Gattuso, an all-Ferrari 458. Row 3, before we get to the all-Audi R8. Row 4, Carlos Vieira and Lourenco de Vega. Row 5, a car to watch for there, Isaac Mulu in the Auto Orlando Sport Porsche. Alongside him, Alexander Taukanitsa in the AT Racing Ferrari. Nicolo Schiro in the DriveX Porsche didn't get to race yesterday. That car broke on the formation lap, so they've got a lot to prove. Chris van der Drift in the Biotech McLaren should be spectacular from 14th. Another driver who's going to be very frustrated, the inside row 8, Michael Lyons. He didn't race yesterday. His co-pilot, Matteo Beretta, eliminated in an early incident. Way down in 17th in the Ombra Racing Ferrari, but former race winner in the International GT Open, we can expect to see him going strongly. Rafael Suzuki, the very amiable Brazilian in the second Biotech McLaren, could push on up through the order. Let's say base off, he and Alessandro Pierguidi going very, very well yesterday to finish second in the GTS class. Václav Maliv and Freddie Kramer complete the penultimate row, and then all on his own at the back of the grid is Andrea Montermini. Unfortunately, if you joined us yesterday, you'll have seen a very nasty incident between Marco Seefried in the Rinaldi Racing Porsche and Francesco Castellacci in the Kessel Racing Ferrari. Well, the good news is that both drivers are absolutely fine. I was talking to them last night. Unfortunately, the Kessel Racing Ferrari of Castellacci very, very badly damaged and unable to be repaired for today, and the Rinaldi Racing Porsche, because they had an incident in testing as well on Friday, it means that they don't have the spare parts, and so we'll next be seeing them in 3 weeks' time at the Nürburgring, which unfortunately means that we're a couple down where we should have been in qualifying. We also don't have Rafael Unzarazagas. Mosler, he prompted a safety car yesterday when that car expired out on the track, and so he will not be making the grid for this second race of the weekend. Drivers just running around warming up those Dunlop tyres, because one of the beauties of the International GT Open is that all the cars run on the same compound Dunlop tyre, which offers both a 2 to 3 lap window of maximum grip in qualifying, but then also presents a real test for the drivers to manage that tyre perfectly through the course of the race. And certainly the drivers running in the Super GT class are saying that because of the mid-speed corners, the undulations, this is a very high abrasion circuit, and therefore tyre management is very much to the forefront of their mind. The GTS class, they still have to do that, but maybe cars just a little bit kinder on the tyres, which is why we have seen this season many of the GTS runners challenging the overall race leaders. So there is yesterday's GTS race winner, Carlos Vieira, just weaving around in the Nova Driver Audi. Very, very popular home support here for the Nova Driver team, and a lot of people taking to the internet last night to express their pleasure to see that car going so strongly yesterday. The Ombra Racing Ferrari just wheel around. Also catch a glimpse there of the Ginetta G55. And there is Andrea Montermini at the very back of the grid. Be fascinated to see how he progresses today. But we briefly talked about the handicaps, and within the pit stops, they've all got to stop for 70 seconds. Andrea Montermini, based on having won his class twice at Paul Ricard, gets 15 seconds for each of those victories. He was second yesterday, and that's another 10 seconds, so he has to spend an additional 40 seconds in the pits. The Taukanitsas, car number 1, they've got an additional 15 seconds. Miguel Ramos and Nicky Pastorelli, pole position car, well, they have also got an additional 15 seconds in the pits. We'll discuss that more later, because the lights are out on the pace car, about to go racing for the second time this weekend here in Portimao. The cars come down the crest into turn 14. Rolling start as ever, of course, in the International GT Open. Yesterday the starts were a little bit messy. Let's hope it's slightly clean stairs. It's Pastorelli in the Vodafone Corvette who paces the field. Alongside him, the bright red Ferrari of Matt Griffin, the AF course car. So we wait for the red lights to flash to green, and then we'll go racing here at Portimao. Here we go, the lights go green. Who's got the jump from the line? They all fan out as they sprint towards turn 1. The road drops away from them and it's Pastorelli firmly in the middle of the road who should lead into the first corner, although Matt Griffin tries around the outside, and it's Griffin who leaps around Pastorelli, takes the lead of the race. Pastorelli into second. It's Jan Seyfarth who's come up into third position. Dietrich Schüthoff has been pushed down to fourth, almost fifth. We've got one of the Bitech McLarens who's gone off, also Nicola DeMarco as well, rotating in number 51, the Kessel Racing Ferrari, and we've got a problem there for one of the Corvettes. That's possibly Schüthoff, who has been entangled with another car. We'll pick up who that was in a moment. Yes, it was Dietrich Schüthoff in the Corvette, so disappointment for the Dutch driver. It's also rather served to disperse the field. Somehow Isaac Tutmulu was able to pick his way through that. We'll identify the other car that went off, also running very wide, coming out of the turn 5 hairpin there, Nicolo Schiro, last year's European F3 Open champion, who has had a pretty tough weekend in the DriveX Porsche. Consistently some 2.5 seconds off the pace. He's on the tail at the moment of Roman Mavlanov in the Russian Bears Racing Ferrari, although Schiro runs wide, kicks up the dirt. Now let's have a look at this. So there is the McLaren and the Kessel Ferrari just making contact. It's Nicola DeMarco, and let's see what happened to the Corvette. They were fighting for fourth. Schüthoff gets tapped by Tutmulu, rotates around, and who is it who has come into contact with him? Unfortunately, it's Carlos Vieira in the Nova driver Audi, who had absolutely nowhere to go, unsighted, taps into the side of the Corvette. And hopefully that's not race over for both of them. I suspect if it is, we could well be seeing the intervention of the safety car. The car stranded in the middle of the road. Meanwhile, though, the race leaders coming through to complete the first lap of the race. Stefano Gattuso running very strongly, up in fourth position in pursuit of Jan Seyfarth. So flashing through, it is Matt Griffin who leads from Nicky Pastorelli by just under a second. Then third place leading GTS is Jan Seyfarth, fourth Stefano Gattuso, fifth Isaac Tutmulu. And then being demoted there, Lorenzo De Vega by Michael Lyons. Lyons, who was extraordinarily frustrated yesterday not to even get to race, really feels that he's got the pace to challenge for GTS podiums this weekend in the AF Course Ferrari. Also trying to follow through past Lorenzo De Vega. That's Joel Comathius, who, former Champ Car driver, also former star of the International GT Open. He's claimed a championship along the way, and he is looking to gain ground in the battle for what is 8th, 9th and 10th position. 8th currently hands then of Michael Lyons. Also trying to make ground is Johnny Lawson, who dives to the inside of Nicolo Schiro, and all the while that's Antal Knitzer drops back as a spin there for Michele Rugolo in the next of the AF Course Ferraris. Around he goes, rejoins. It's been a very robust start to this race, as into the pit lane, unfortunately, is Dietrich Schüthoff in the V8 Racing Chevrolet Corvette, and I suspect that that could well be that, as we've got a very tight battle going on here between Alexei Basov, who's made a fantastic start in the Ester Motorsports Ferrari. He's just ahead of the Russian Bears Racing Ferrari, Roman Mavlanov. Let's have another look at Michele Rugolo, who fortunately there received a little bit of assistance as Jackie Camp in the Corvette, who turned him around. Stefano Gattuso and Isaac Tutmulu beginning to engage themselves in battle. Then we've got Alexei Basov and Roman Mavlanov, and already up onto their tail is the hard-charging Michael Lyons. Lyons, who's kind of got a dual career, interestingly. He's a very, very proficient racer of historic single-seaters. He's won the Tasman Trophy Revival back in Australia and New Zealand for Formula 5000 cars, but then is making himself a very well-established GT racer. We see a challenge from Roman Mavlanov, who dives to the inside of Alexei Basov. Basov looks to fight back, though, as they arrive into turn 1, but it's the move made by Mavlanov. As look at this, Andrea Montermini making progress. He moves up into 14th position momentarily past Alexander Taukanitsa Sr. Belarusian driver fights back. Montermini looking to squeeze through. Just behind him are the Bitech McLarens of Rafael Suzuki and Chris van der Drift. Also the recovering Nicola DeMarco is in the mix there as well after their early spins, as Michael Lyons launches to the inside of Alexei Basov, makes a little bit of contact into turn 5. That brings Lorenzo De Vega and Joel Comathius back into the mix, and also just on the tail of Comathius, the red and blue Ombre Racing Ferrari of Alvaro Barber. Next along is Johnny Lawson in the Kessel Racing Ferrari, who was second in the opening race of the year at Paul Ricard in the wet weather with Jan Magnussen. This weekend, Lawson partnering Daniel Zampieri. Very quick driver combination, that. And then on his tail is Nicolo Schiro in the DriveX Porsche. And Schiro, well, he and co-driver Archie Hamilton have been struggling as much as anything this weekend with making those Dunlop tyres last. Porsche's always notoriously hard on their tyres, and so Schiro is keen to push hard in these early stages, but at the same time, has got to think about the long game, although we're already 5 minutes into this race. 50 minutes means that essentially for each driver it's a 25-minute sprint race for them in their stint. And so Shiro wanting to gain the ground. All the while, though, Matt Griffin is leading the race by about a second over Nicky Pastorelli, as there was a brief glimpse of Claudio Stanwitz, Michele Rugelo's co-pilot, just discussing exactly what tipped Rugolo into that spin. So through they come, sprinting over the line, completing the third lap of the race. And Michael Lyons still frustrated behind Alexei Basov. Slight gap back to Lorenko De Viga, who's got Comathius and Barber on his tail. Also trying to make ground there is Nicola De Marco. He is on the tail of the New Zealander Chris van der Drift, and van der Drift looking to dive to the inside of his Bitech McLaren teammate Raphael Suzuki. And through goes van der Drift. That's a nice move from van der Drift. He also gives Suzuki sufficient room that there is no way through for Nicola De Marco, but the former Formula 2 racer Nicola De Marco looking to gain ground. And there we catch a glimpse of Andrea Montermini, who is making good progress. Also part of that battle is Francesc Gutierrez in the Ginetta G55, who launches the inside De Marco. Ginetta always agile on the brakes. No way through. So there is Matt Griffin, the race leader, in pursuit. Nicky Pastorelli, who was very successful in last year's FIA GT1 Championship, but also had a prodigious single-seater career, making it all the way to Champ Car in the USA. Here is Griffin's teammate, Michael Lyons, who's made the move on the Ester Motorsports runner, Alexei Basov. Basov, last year's Copper Shell Ferrari champion, and has also been an overall top 3 finisher in the Russian and Ukrainian touring car championships. Very quick gentleman driver, and Andrea Montermini is now very much part of this battle. He dives to the inside of Johnny Larson, and that is maybe the opportunity for Nicolo Shiro to try and follow through, but Shiro in the DriveX Porsche to the outside, then looks to the cut back to the inside line. Does the Kessel Racing Ferrari give him the room? Shiro should go through here. Robust stuff from Nicolo Shiro, but he's gained the position as he is busy fighting for 13th place. Some of them running out very, very wide as they come through turn 14, completing the 4th lap of the race. This whole scrap, by the way, is for 10th position, more or less, as Joel Comathius takes his opportunity to take a punt around the outside of Lorenko De Viga, but the Nova driver Audi holds its ground, forces Comathius out wide. It means that Montermini gains the place, and Alvaro Barber also looking to try and poach the place off his Ombra Racing teammate. No way through there. Andrea Montermini is up to now 10th position. Fantastic performance from Montermini, from 25th on the grid to come through to 10th in the Vallorba course Ferrari. He might make that 9th on the tail of Lorenko De Viga. Alexei Basov is De Viga's next target, provided he's able to withstand the attentions of Andrea Montermini. And Montermini gets a superb run through turn 6 around the outside, gives him the inside line for turn 7, gains the place. The Audi won't be able to poke its nose back up the inside through turn 8, and then they come on to one of the most exhilarating sections of the circuit, up over the crest. It's almost like a roller coaster. They come down the dip and into the very quick left-hander of turn 9. Nicolo Shiro is doing all that he can to try and find a way past Alvaro Barber. Barber in turn on the tail of his teammate Joel Comathius. Barber, if you cast your mind back 12 months ago, was almost the champion in last year's International GT Open in the Valois Aston Martin. It's his first appearance in the championship this year in the Ombra Racing Ferraris. He goes side by side with Nicolo Shiro. They come into the hairpin at turn 13, and flashing his lights as well as part of that battle is Alexander Taukanitsa Sr., the Austrian-based Belarusian, as Andrea Montermini continues his exhilarating charge up through the field. We're about to complete 20% race distance. We're only 10 minutes away from the opening of the pit window. And Montermini, don't forget, he's got to spend that additional 40 seconds in the pit lane. So it'll be somewhat frustrating for Montermini as Comathius goes around the outside of Lorenko De Viga. Shiro tries to go to the inside of Alvaro Barber. Alexander Taukanitsa Sr. just sits there and watches those in front do their battling. Then Taukanitsa launches the inside Nicolo Shiro. Shiro sees him coming just in time, closes the door more or less enough. Montermini, by the way, is up into 8th position now as a result of all of that. Out of our view, Matt Griffin is just gently building his advantage in the AF Course Ferrari at the head of the field. He is now 2.5 seconds clear of Nicky Pastorelli as the fight for 10th position works its way through the hairpin at turn 5, and it's pretty much the fight from 10th all the way down to 20th with Jackie Camp in the Corvette. Part of the battle as Nicola Shiro dives to the inside of Alvaro Barber, and Shiro goes through in the Drivex Porsche. Really nice opportunistic driving from Shiro. Now he plants his right foot, comes up over the crest out of turn 8, swooping through the left-hander at turn 9 before they climb once more into the double right-hander at turn 10, where you're pretty much turning into the corner before you can see it. And they come round the second element, and the road just plunges away from them once more. Andrea Montermini is already up onto the tail of Michael Lyons. This is the battle then for 7th and 8th position. It's Lyons in the red, AF Course Ferrari. Andrea Montermini, the Vallorba Course, predominantly white machine, right onto his tail. And it's brilliant just to see the Vallorba Course Ferrari on the grid this season. They've had a very tough winter with the loss of a major sponsor, but the team have rallied round, worked very, very hard, and have put together a very competitive package for this year. Both Lyons and Montermini run so far wide. They almost went into the ocean there, as they then come out over the tabletop, along past the pits, cross the line and go into their 7th lap of the race. Montermini lights the blaze, trying to pressurise Michael Lyons. Lyons currently 5th in the GTS class, GTS being led at the moment by Jan Seyfarth in the Mercedes from Stefano Gattuso and Isaac Tutamulu in the Auto Orlando Sport Porsche. And that Porsche has been rather robbed of the opportunities to get on the podium really all season long. They've been passed late in the race, had bad luck with mechanical failures as well. So we'll see if he and Dimitris Tverikos can hold that position, as through goes Montermini into the hairpin at turn 5. And that's up to 7th position now for Andrea Montermini, the former Formula 1 driver, former IndyCar racer as well, former star of European Formula 3000 before he made the transition into sports cars. Very, very amiable figure in the paddock as well is Montermini, but always does the business on the track. And now that he's past Lyons, he's romping away from him. Now it'll be interesting on this lap probably to see the true pace of the Vallorba Course Ferrari. At the moment, the fastest car in the race is the race leader, the AF Course Ferrari of Matt Griffin, who is now 3.8 seconds clear of Nicky Pastorelli. But Montermini is quicker than Pastorelli, so he's the 2nd quickest car on the track, but this really is his first clear run. His next target is Roman Mavlanov in the Russian Bears Ferrari in the GTS class, just 4.5 seconds up the road ahead of him. But last time through, Montermini was over a second quicker than Mavlanov. So there is the GTS leader, Jan Seyfarth. 2nd place, Stefano Gattuso, but he is being closed on here by Isaac Tutamulu. And Tutamulu, who's previously raced in the World Touring Car Championship, also in the Porsche Super Cup, right up, pressurising Stefano Gattuso. Gattuso just sliding the rear of the car on the brakes into turn 3. Into a quick left-hand kink at turn 4. That will bring them over the brow. The heavy braking zone at turn 5. Well, the Nova Drive Rowdy of Carlos Vieira continues after that first lap incident, but with various bits of the front splitter, looking to depart the car in all sorts of directions. So frustration for him. He's currently down in 24th position as well. Last of the car circulating, because unfortunately we have lost from proceedings the other car involved in that incident, Dietrich Schutoff in the V8 Racing Corvette. He has gone no further. So the fight for 2nd in the GTS class and 4th in the race overall. And Gattuso having all the right questions asked of him here by the Auto Orlando Sport Porsche. It's Kessel Racing Ferrari, the black car. Stefano Gattuso. Isaac Tutamulu in the Auto Orlando Sport Porsche on his tail. And this is also the battle for the Gentleman Drivers Trophy as well, which is a new initiative for the 2013 season. It's for drivers of a certain age who've never won an international level championship. And in the case of Stefano Gattuso, it's Marco Zanartini, his co-pilot, who is in the running for that. For Isaac Tutamulu, it's Dimitris Tverikos, his co-driver, who could potentially be victorious. So the pair of them head down out of turn 13 on to turn 14. We've seen some brilliant shots this weekend of the cars almost jumping out of the corner as Stefano Gattuso does so there, and then runs out a little bit wide, as does Tutamulu, and sprint past the Errant AstroTurf on to complete the lap. So 8 laps reeled off with 5 minutes away from the opening of the pit window, and it's still Matt Griffin who leads the way from Nicky Pastorelli and Jan Seyfarth. Andrea Montermini, though, is the driver to watch. He is absolutely flying. That last lap of 1:46.0. 2nd fastest car in the race, aside from the race leader, Matt Griffin. Then we've got still this ferocious fight going on for the places towards the bottom end of the top 10. As Lorenzo De Vega in the Audi R8 still coming under pressure from that man, number 60, Alvaro Barber. And just behind Barber is Chris Vanderdrift in the Bitec McLaren. And Barber dives to the inside of the Nova driver Audi. That's a really nice move from Alvaro Barber. Chris van der Drift tries to follow through as well. He can't quite do it, so that is enough to give Alvaro Barber 12th position. Running out very wide, the second of the Biotech McLarens. That is Rafael Suzuki. As Alexander Talkanitsa in the AT Racing Ferrari dives the inside of van der Drift into turn 5. That got very, very tight. And van der Drift, who at Paul Ricard always seems to be on the receiving end of maybe some over-ambitious moves from his rivals, very nearly makes contact with Talkanitsa. Alexander Talkanitsa, though, in the newly liveried AT Racing Ferrari. Previously, remember that car to be all black. Well, now it's predominantly black, but pretty multicoloured as well. Fantastic livery there, and gains the place. That's enough for 14th position then for Alexander Talkanitsa Senior. A car that we can expect to see really coming through the pack a little bit later on in the race when he passes over to his son. Nicola Di Marco is the next Ferrari to take his turn to try and line up a move on the Biotech McLaren. Get to see some of the AstroTurf being kicked up, and a spin, unfortunately, for Jackie Camp in the Corvette. Evasive action for Michele Rugolo. The pair of them, for one of those days where they seem to get intertwined with each other. So here is Matt Griffin, the race leader in the AF Course Ferrari. Griffin, who is best known as a GT racer, was actually a single-seater contemporary of Lewis Hamilton about a decade ago when Hamilton was in Formula Renault, and the pair of them very evenly matched in terms of pace, which I think gives you an indication of Griffin's overall calibre. He was 4th in last year's British GT Championship, but this year he and Duncan Cameron very much focusing their attention on the International GT Open. Here is the GTS class leader, 3rd in the race overall, Jan Seyfarth in the Seyfarth Mercedes. And he and Miguel Torrell, his co-driver, were delighted after yesterday's performance, where they were able to snatch a GTS class podium late in the race. Was talking to Torrell last night and said, well, by moving to 3rd, you did get yourselves an extra 5 seconds in the pits. And he said, yes, but we just need the points because you never know what's going to happen in the next race. Second place at the moment then is Nicky Pastorelli. Pastorelli and his co-driver, the Portuguese Miguel Ramos, winning yesterday, getting their season really off to a flying start, because in the damp at Paul Ricard they had a fairly wretched weekend, with a 13th place finish in the first race, an early retirement in the second race. And so a couple of solid podiums this weekend would do them the world of good. Nicolo Schiro on the tail of Joel Comathius. This is the fight for 10th position at the moment, though. It's Comathius in the Ombra Racing Ferrari who's got the advantage over the DriveX Porsche of Nicolo Schiro. Schiro pushing very, very hard. Didn't get to race the car yesterday because had a differential problem in qualifying. Then the drive shaft failed actually on the way to the grid, and so he and Archie Hamilton left kicking their heels somewhat. They're looking to put together a very solid performance today as Andrea Montermini continues his progress on up through the field. He's moved ahead now of Roman Mavlanov. That is 6th position then for Montermini. A charging drive up through the field, and it's potentially a matter of time before Montermini finds himself as high as 4th position, because he's on the tail of Isaac Tutamulu, and then Stefano Gattuso not too far right ahead of him either. So 1.5 minutes away from the pit window opening here in the 4th race of the season, the International GT Open here in Portimao. Still Matt Griffin, who leads the race in the AF Course Ferrari. 2nd place is the V8 Racing Corvette of Nicky Pastorelli. 3rd place and leading GTS class is Jan Seyfarth in the Seyfarth Mercedes. But the star thus far has been the Valour Course Ferrari and the Hans van Andrea Montermini. 25th on the grid he lined up, and Montermini is up into 6th position, and he's within about 1.5 seconds, if not a little bit less, of snatching 5th away from Isaac Tutamulu in the Auto Orlando Sport Porsche. Auto Orlando Sport, such a professional team, and whereas with some teams you'll see very glitzy hospitality units in the paddock, with Auto Orlando Sport, every single penny that the team receives goes into developing the car. It's an outfit that goes racing purely for the joy of going racing, and they are always so competitive. And the car running the latest 2013 updates from Porsche has been really very competitive from the outset, but Tutamulu makes a small error there coming out to turn 13, and that's all the opportunity that Andrea Montermini needs. He dives through, snatches 5th position away from Tutamulu, and sprints on to complete his 11th lap of the race. And as a result of that, Tutamulu is now slipping slightly into the clutches of Roman Mavlanov in the Russian Bears Ferrari, who's on his tail. 20 minutes into the race, just under 30 minutes to go. And the driver change window has now opened for the next 10 minutes. So this is when the pit's going to get very, very busy, and it's when the race is really going to turn on its head. Of course, Montermini Racing single-handedly has a problem for Jan Seyfarth. He's got a puncture on the front left tyre of the Seyfarth Mercedes, and that's a disaster for Seyfarth. Well, fortunately, the driver change window is open, so they can make their way to the pits, but it's happened very early on the lap, coming out of turn 4. As already into the pit lane is Alexander Stalkenitzer Sr. That's to hand over to his son, Alexander Stalkenitzer Jr. Such a pity for Jan Seyfarth, because he's now going to have to limp that car around, hope that he doesn't do damage to the bodywork and the suspension. It's going to give his co-driver, Miguel Toril, an awful lot to do as well. So a real pity for Seyfarth, because they were looking so competitive all weekend and had a very good chance of claiming the GTS victory today. As it is, that is looking extremely unlikely, I would suggest, unless we get a safety car. So into the pit lane as well comes Carlos Vieira. That is to hand over to Cesar Campanico. All the while, though, Matt Griffin continues on his way, and I would suspect that Griffin is going to stay out pretty late into this driver change window. His co-driver is Duncan Cameron. Cameron, who, not a professional driver, but he's a very quick amateur who has learned an awful lot under the tutelage of Matt Griffin. But Cameron and Miguel Ramos will be of reasonably even pace. So Pastorelli comes in to hand over to Miguel Ramos. Matt Griffin continues on his way to try and give Duncan Cameron as large an advantage as he possibly can, as Isaac Tutamulu and Roman Mavlanov go into battle through turn 1, and that should resolve itself in favour of the Russian Bears Ferrari. It does. So the place gained up into 5th position then for Mavlanov, and then 2nd in the GTS class as well, because the leader is now Stefano Gattuso, and this, the battle for 3rd in the race overall, and Andrea Montermini could well take 3rd here. He tries to draw alongside Gattuso. They're up against some of the cars that have just come out of the pits as well. The first of those is going to be Kirill Ladygin in the 2nd of the Russian Bears Ferraris. They're able to move their way past the ex-World Touring Car Championship racer. So Gattuso and Montermini racing for 3rd in the race overall. Just ahead of them is Alexander Stalkenitzer Jr., who has completed his pit stop. So let's see what happens here. Seyfarth maybe just caught a sharp edge of the curb, and this has been the risk with the drivers running wide, as they have been so frequently early in this race, as you can just catch a raised edge of the curb, and if you hit the tyre sidewall in the wrong position, that can just be enough to cause the puncture. Montermini will be keen here to move clear of Gattuso, and he does, to the inside line. Nicely done from Andrea Montermini. That brings him up into 3rd position overall. But of course, Montermini has got that very long pit stop to come, given the success that he and Luca Filippi have had in the first 3 races of the year. Stefano Gattuso, well, he has got no additional time to spend in the pits, as now Montermini dives in, elects to make his pit stop. As out of the pits heads Miguel Toril in the Seyfarth Mercedes, who joins pretty much a whole lap down from where that car departed the action. Roman Mavlanov, not unsurprisingly, continues on his way in pursuit of Stefano Gattuso. So there is Andrea Montermini receiving counsel from the team. And if you've just joined us, just to remind you that Luca Filippi, Andrea's regular co-driver, not here today. He's on television commentary duties with Sky Italia at the Spanish Grand Prix. As we are almost at half race distance, and it's still Matt Griffin, the of course Ferrari, who leads. And because of the length of the pit stops here, most of these cars are coming out right into the mix of the battle amongst the race leaders. Stefano Gattuso being chased down by Roman Mavlanov. All the while, Isaac Tutamulu trying to squeeze his way past Miguel Toril in the Seyfarth Mercedes, who, not surprisingly, wants to get himself up to speed, and therefore he isn't going to give Tutamulu any sort of advantage, because they could well be battling for GTS. Well, not Tutamulu, but Tutamulu's co-pilot, Dimitris Verikoska, will be battling with Miguel Toril later in the race for a GTS class podium. So this, although it's lappery, is essentially a battle as well, and Toril thus far fairly uninclined to allow Tutamulu through. Matt Griffin leads the race in the AF Course Ferrari, switch of team this weekend for Griffin and Cameron, and they were saying that they've very quickly found the AF Course Ferrari to be much more to their liking, although a slightly softer setup means that they have been learning just to get the confidence of the car in turning into some of these corners here in Portimao. But once they'd accomplished that, they were generally very, very pleased with the progress of the weekend. Andrea Montermini leaves the pits, and he will look to continue his charge. Griffin, though, will want to give Duncan Cameron as large an advantage as he possibly can. Of course, they didn't race yesterday, had a fairly wretched time at Paul Ricard. It means they've got no additional time to carry for the pit stop. So provided the AF Course team do their job, which they almost invariably do, it's going to be just a 70-second pit stop, as in comes his teammate, Michael Lyons, who hops out of the car. Matteo Beretta clambers in. And Beretta yesterday, who unfortunately didn't make it to the finish after an incident, will be keen to rectify that this time around. May well see Matt Griffin coming in on this occasion to hand over to Duncan Cameron. Griffin's advantage at the moment over Stefano Gattuso is some 30 seconds. The real key is going to be the relative pace of Duncan Cameron in comparison to that of Miguel Ramos, because Ramos having to spend an additional 15 seconds in the pits, but if he's able to make that up over Duncan Cameron, then we could be in for an absolutely thrilling finish here. Well, Griffin is going to continue on for one more lap, so through he goes. This reels off then 15 laps of the race, and Matt Griffin, lights ablaze, charges along the start and finish straight here before the road drops away into the first turn. Griffin's such a precise and smooth driver. He's coming on to the tail, though, of a couple of cars battling up ahead of him. It appeared to be one of the Russian Bear Ferraris, and also one of the Corvettes as well. Stefano Gattuso continues in second position, and he is, as we said, the best part of 30 seconds or so back from Matt Griffin, who will be wanting to work his way past this traffic as quickly as he possibly can. Into the pit lane, meanwhile, comes Isaac Tutumulu, and that is to hand over to Dimitris Dverakos. The Auto Orlando Sport Porsche coming in from third position. Coming to a halt, the Greek driver Dverakos poised and ready to clamber in. Dverakos, who has previously raced in the FIA GT3 Championship as well as the International GT Open. Very, very competitive at Paul Ricard a couple of weeks ago. So that car could well find itself in contention for GTS class victory. Also in is Nicolo Schiro to hand over to Archie Hamilton. So Archie, who raced last year in the National GT Open with Auto Orlando Sport in the GTS class, making the step up to Super GT this year with the DriveX Porsche team poised in the cockpit. And it's not beyond the realms possibility here that DriveX Porsche could snatch a Super GT class podium from today's race. So Matt Griffin comes into the final turn on his 16th lap, and is this going to be the lap in which he dives into the pit lane to hand over to Duncan Cameron? It is. So Griffin hits the brakes, gets the AF Course Ferrari down to the pit lane speed limit. Duncan Cameron, who is probably best known in the UK for having made his fortune from running a price comparison website, which is very, very popular, before turning his attention to motor racing. Poised and ready and waiting. Griffin is waved into position. Cameron clambers out. And although it's been a change of team for Cameron and Griffin, they're a very well-established driver partnership. And the pit stop running thus far pretty much seamlessly as we head towards the final 20 minutes of the race. Also in is Stefano Gattuso. That will be to hand over to Marco Zannattini. There is Zannattini in position, ready to go. Zannattini finished 11th in last year's GTS Championship in the International GT Open. He was also 14th in the European Ferrari Challenge as well last year, Zannattini. So he gets strapped in. Andrea Montermini continues on his way. He's up onto the tail of another ex-Formula 1 racer, Giorgio Pantano, who raced back in 2004 with Jordan. Also has raced in IndyCar as well, Pantano, before turning his attention to GT racing with the Bitech McLaren. But Montermini dives through and on past him. The difficulty for Andrea Montermini is that after that lengthy pit stop, he is just up into 17th position as a result of that move on Giorgio Pantano. So that charge from the back of the pack that Montermini had to do in the early stages, well, he's going to have to repeat once more in this last 20 minutes. Will he be able to race his way up onto the Super GT class podium? If he does that, that would be an absolutely remarkable performance from the Italian. Giorgio Panzano then in the Biotech McLaren. And also just behind them is Alexander Taukanitsa Jr. And Taukanitsa Jr. may have had a drama out of our sight as Duncan Cameron out on track. We'll find out at the end of this lap whether or not he is still in the lead race. We've got another car. It's not going to puncture. He's just taken some of the AstroTurf lining the track with him. And that was one of the Russian Bears Ferraris by the looks of things. Matteo Beretta dives to the inside of Mario Cordoni. The driver interchange is now finished, so it's going to be pure race to the line. And what are the gaps going to be looking like? And who stands the best chances of coming through and claiming the various class podiums? I think that move from Matteo Beretta could well have been for something like second, if not the lead, of the GTS class. We'll find out in due course. There is Marco Zanettini, who is demoted by Miguel Ramos. Let's see, end of this lap, what the gap between Duncan Cameron and Miguel Ramos is, and then we will get a true indication of the task that awaits Miguel Ramos. At the moment, though, it would appear to be Cameron who leads. He's just flashed through past our commentary position, so he's going to have something like a 20-second, if not more, advantage over Miguel Ramos. Ramos comes out of the penultimate turn before plunging down the hill. Marco Zanettini, I think, could well be in third position in the race overall, and certainly in the lead of the GTS class for the time being. So here comes Ramos, accelerating up over the brow, along past the pit boxes. Cesar Campanico snatches a break, possibly in the somewhat battle-scarred Nova driver Audi R8. Right, the difference between Cameron and Ramos is 27.3 seconds. The question now is what sort of pace has Miguel Ramos got relative to Duncan Cameron? So to run you down then the classification, the race is being led by Duncan Cameron. Second place is Miguel Ramos in the Corvette. Third place, Marco Zanettini in the Kessel Racing Ferrari, who leads the GTS class from Paul Rosell in the Russian Bears Racing Ferrari. And then it is Matteo Beretta in the AF Course Ferrari, who is fifth, and he is third in the GTS class. And Stefano Constantini looks to do battle with Alessandro Pierre Guidi, and Pierre Guidi, who qualified right at the sharp end of the field for yesterday's race, has raced with considerable success in various FIA GT championships, looking to clamber his way up through the field. And it's going to be a nice tight battle this. It's Archie Hamilton currently to the head of it in the DriveX Porsche. There he is in the white and yellow car, and he is in 8th position. And thereafter it would seem as if all bets are off as Daniel Zampieri does what he can to move around Luis Razia, the Brazilian driver, who very nearly made it to Formula 1 this year. But he has now got to worry about Zampieri on his tail. Then we've got Constantini, Alessandro Pierre Guidi, and also Lorenzo Bontempelli in the red Ferrari with the white roof, the Kessel Racing driver, who is coming into the mix as well. And with 60 minutes to go, they're going to have to get a move on here if they really want to bring themselves on up through the field, because you have to say that Marco Zanettini could well be a legitimate target for Rosell in the Russian Bears Ferrari, likewise for Matteo Beretta. So the GTS podium is still very much in dispute, provided these drivers squabbling for the places towards the bottom end of the top 10 don't slow themselves down too much. Here is the race leader, all the while Duncan Cameron, although last time around Miguel Ramos was 2 seconds quicker than Cameron. As Cameron gets himself up to speed. It's Matt Griffin watching in the AF Course Ferrari garage. And the challenge the drivers were saying as Montermini weaves his way on through the field. And Andrea Montermini is going supremely well and has already raced himself up now into 12th position. Bontempelli and Stefano Constantini go side by side, and Andrea Montermini is going to try and dive to the inside of Lorenzo Bontempelli, and through he goes. So Bontempelli gets demoted by Montermini. Montermini could well race himself up into third in the Super GT class, because there is the third place car at the moment, the DriveX Porsche of Archie Hamilton. Montermini is fourth in the Super GT class and is almost into the top 10 now after what's been a fairly ferocious first sector of this lap. We've got the battle still ongoing between Luis Razia and Daniel Zampieri. That is for 8th and 9th position. And it's still the Bitec McLaren just keeping its nose clear of last year's GTS champion, Zampieri, reunited with the Kessel Racing team once more. And Zampieri, when he's in the mood, is always spectacular behind the wheel. That Kessel Racing Ferrari. Razia, though, was saying after the race yesterday that he just really feels that Bitec McLaren's coming together very nicely. It just feels a little bit more grounded. They feel like they're understanding the car, understanding the setup a bit more. And certainly looking forward to the Nürburgring in 3 weeks' time, where they think they're going to be very, very competitive indeed. For now, though, they are busy fighting over 5th position in the GTS class. All the while, they've got Andrea Montermini looming large on their tail. So running down into the final corner and running very, very wide there is Luis Razia. That could be the opportunity that Zampieri needs. In the meantime, at the front of your shot, you see Marco Zanettini under pressure from Matteo Beretta. That means that it's now Paul Rosell in the Russian Bears Ferrari, who leads the GTS class, car 63. Which would be a very impressive result for him and Roman Mavlanov. As Montermini now dives to the inside of Zampieri, goes through past the GTS Ferrari, and he should be able to pick his way past the Bitec McLaren by the time they arrive into hairpin at turn 5, particularly as he's aided by Razia running out very wide. The road suddenly drops away from them. Getting the braking point is critical. Andrea Montermini does that. Zampieri tries to follow his way through, but Razia is wide, so that shuts the door. So now Montermini's next target is Archie Hamilton, and that is for a place on the Super GT podium. In the meantime, though, Archie Hamilton is also fighting for best Porsche honours. He's getting himself onto the tail of the Auto Orlando Sport Porsche of Dimitris Deverikos. Already Montermini racing his way clear of Luis Razia. His deficit to Archie Hamilton when they came through was just over a second, as Duncan Cameron working his way through the traffic. And that's a slightly slower lap from Duncan Cameron on that occasion. At 1 minute 48.7, he has been passed there by Alessandro Pierguidi, who is a long, long way down the field. 22nd, here is Miguel Ramos, and last time through, Ramos 1.5 seconds faster. Suspect that he's going to run out of time here because the gap is still out over 20 seconds. It's 23.2 seconds to be precise, but Miguel Ramos, at the moment, comfortably the fastest of the leading duo, chipping that gap down onwards, but really he needs to make that deficit or the rate of capture rather, something like 2.5 seconds a lap at the moment. Hovering around about the second margin, lap on lap really isn't going to be quite enough, although this has all the makings of being pretty much perfect weekend for Miguel Ramos and Nicky Pastorelli. Will bring them right into contention. Here then is the GTS class leader and third in the race overall, Paul Rosell, who we've seen previously in the International GT Open. He was a class winner last year in the Barcelona 24 Hours as well, and has won his class in the Spanish GT Championship. Quick and experienced driver. He's also the sole non-Russian in the Russian Pairs Racing driver lineup. At the moment, demonstrating exactly why he's been hired by the team, because he is looking very smooth. Andrea Montermini has gained 2 more places on this lap. He's already clear of Archie Hamilton and third in the Super GT class. He's also ahead now of Dimitris Deverikos. That brings Andrea Montermini up into 6th position. And remember, he came out of the pits in 18th. So Montermini utterly charging. He's only about 2 seconds back from Marco Zanettini as well. I think that could possibly be about as far up the order as he's going to get. And there he goes, past Zanettini in the battle for third in the GTS class, because now Dimitris Deverikos has got a very good chance of demoting Marco Zanettini here. So the Black Kessel Racing Ferrari doing battle with the Auto Orlando Sport Porsche. That is for a place on the GTS podium. Here they come down into turn 14. Are we going to see Deverikos able to make the move on Zanettini this time through? Running out wide is Zanettini, and this is going to be the opportunity for the Auto Orlando Sport Porsche as they pick their way along the start and finish straight, kicking up the AstroTurf in their wake. All the while Archie Hamilton holding watching brief. So it's Zanettini to the inside line. Deverikos is going to swoop around the outside. That's a brilliant move from Dimitris Deverikos. It gives him the third place in the GTS class. It gives him the lead of the Gentleman Drivers Trophy as well. And Zanettini then a little bit lurid in his defence, possibly from Archie Hamilton. And Hamilton has got Luis Razzia for company right on his tail, with Daniel Zampieri, Stefano Constantini and the rest all following through. Also, Alexander Taukanitsa Jr. is trying to bring himself into that battle now. Hamilton thinks about the move to the inside line into the hairpin at turn 5, and Zanettini runs a little bit wide, misses his braking point. Through goes Hamilton. Through also goes Razzia, and possibly as well Zampieri in the Kessel Ferrari. Yes, Daniel Zampieri squeezes through to Marco Zanettini. Rather being mugged here because Stefano Constantini dives through. Lorenzo Bontempelli will take his turn next, or will at least attempt to. Zanettini able to cover the racing line though in front of Bontempelli. That in turn throws Bontempelli back into the clutches of Alexander Taukanitsa Jr., who flashes his lights, anxious to try and make progress in the Super GT80 Racing Ferrari. Bontempelli though takes advantage of the right-hander at turn 10 to overhaul Zanettini. Zanettini, but he's not really made that much in the way of errors on this lap. He was just wide into the hairpin at turn 5, got a little bit crossed up at turn 3 as well, and he's, rather unfortunately for him, lost something like 8 places into the bargain, because Alexander Taukanitsa Jr. goes around the outside of him at the turn 13 hairpin. Giorgio Pantano looking to do much the same as well. And the second of the Bitech McLarens, although Zanettini shuts off that avenue of attack for Pantano as they come down the hill into the final turn. This is going to complete their 22nd lap of the race, and Pantano gets a superb run, draws alongside the Ferrari, and this is what it's all about. Beautiful supercars running side by side as they hit the braking zone for the first corner, and Giorgio Pantano goes through. He takes the place. That's 13th then for Pantano in the Bitech McLaren, as he looks to race his way up onto the tail of still this fairly frenetic fight that's going on for 7th position. At the head of the field, Matt Griffin leads the way still by now 18.5 seconds, or rather Duncan Cameron leads the way by 18.5 seconds from Miguel Ramos. But Ramos last time through was the best part of 3 seconds quicker, and if he continues at that sort of rate, it's just possible that Ramos could get onto terms with Duncan Cameron between now and the checker flag, particularly if Cameron feels the pressure a little bit. It's on to Taukanitsa Jr. We expected a little bit more from him today, maybe, as Matteo Beretta has been caught now by Andrea Montermini in the battle, would you believe, for 4th position. It's not impossible here that Montermini could get on the overall race podium. He's able to dispatch Beretta fairly quickly. He is just 8 seconds back from Paul Rosell, but he's 3 seconds that quicker than Rosell, and through into 4th place goes Montermini. So Andrea Montermini goes through into 4th position. We have got 7.25 minutes to go here, and if Andrea Montermini, with an extra 40 seconds in the pits and starting from the back of the grid, can get on the overall race podium, that will be, I think, one of the best drives that we've ever seen in the International GT Open. Here he comes then up over the crest, completes the lap, and his deficit to Paul Rosell is 7.8 seconds, but he is 1.6 seconds faster on that lap, and that was bottled up behind Matteo Beretta. Then this GTS fight comes through, headed up by Luis Razzia, as Bontempelli thinks about the move on Stefano Constantini. And all the while, he's got Alexander Taukanitsa Jr. on his tail, and Taukanitsa elbows his way through, takes the place off Bontempelli. That is 10th position then for the Belarusian. Constantini, his next target in the Umbra Racing Ferrari. That's the blue and red car, number 6, that had the big slide. So he got the power down coming out of turn 3. And Taukanitsa Jr. is looking to make the move into the hairpin at turn 5, gets the AT Racing Ferrari stop just in time. Constantini also able to withstand a little bit of a nibble from Lorenzo Bontempelli, who is trying to squeeze his way through in their fight for 10th position. The gap between the leaders, by the way, Duncan Cameron and Miguel Ramos, I think the previous lap had been a bad one from Cameron. It's still 17.5 seconds, which is looking very good for the AF Course Ferrari of Duncan Cameron and Matt Griffin to claim their first win in the International GT Open for 2013. It's also really the start of their championship charge after the wretched weekend at Paul Ricard, not getting the chance to race yesterday. It's going to leave us with some very interesting looking championship standings. Against there's Alexander Taukanitsa Jr. now looking to take his turn to squeeze past the McLaren of Luis Razzia. There is Razzia in the Bitech McLaren. The AT Racing Ferrari right on his tail. So they sprint into the final turn, the road just falling away from the spectacular section of the circuit, and Tao Kanitsa in particular yesterday was actually getting all four wheels off the ground. Again, runs a little bit wide, kicks up the AstroTurf, he gets the run on the McLaren, and he's going to be past him by the time they break the timing beam. And that moves Tao Kanitsa then up into 8th position. And also, it brings him now into contention to challenge Archie Hamilton for 4th in the Super GT class. There is Hamilton being reeled in by the Ferrari. What about the fight for 3rd position as we look at Stefano Constantini launching a move to the inside? Luis Razzia, Lorenzo Bontempelli in hot pursuit as well, and Bontempelli could well have a run here on Constantini, and Constantini knows it, tries to cover the inside line, but Bontempelli gains the place. Through he goes as they hit the brakes into turn 5, so that is now 10th position in the hands of Lorenzo Bontempelli. And Bontempelli now setting his sights on Luis Razzia. Bontempelli, who scored 1 victory last year in the GTS class in the International GT Open. One of the most popular characters in the paddock as well, a former champion in the GTS class going back a couple of years. Thoroughly enjoys his racing. And really getting his head down and charging today. We've still got this ongoing battle then for top Porsche honours. At the moment it's Dimitris Tverakos who has the position, or does he? Because Archie Hamilton looks to try and squeeze past the Autolando Sport Porsche. Alexander Tao Kanitsa Jr. also looming large on the tail of Hamilton, and in turn that then gives a slightly different complexion to the Gentleman Drivers Trophy battle, because could well be Alexander Tao Kanitsa Sr. who will claim the honours of that if Tverakos gets overhauled by Alexander Tao Kanitsa Jr. as Hamilton, Tao Kanitsa Jr. goes side by side out of turn 14. Again, running very wide was Tao Kanitsa, but it gives him the momentum as they sprint along the start and finish straight. Just 3 minutes to go, so we are more than likely into the penultimate lap of the race. Maybe not. The advantage that Cameron's got over Ramos is 12.8 seconds. It's come down dramatically. It was a very bad lap from Duncan Cameron last time round while we've been watching this battle for the top 10 placings. And Cameron did a 1 minute 51 as opposed to a 1 minute 47.5 for Miguel Ramos. So Ramos almost 4 seconds quicker than Cameron last time through. Cameron can't afford that sort of performance. Also, Andrea Montermini in his chase down for 3rd position on Paul Rosell is now only 2.8 seconds back as we see Giorgio Pantano sliding to the inside of Stefano Constantini. That gives 11th place to Pantano. Right here is Montermini then. 4th place. He was 2.8 seconds back from Rosell at the start of the lap. He's already brought that down by a second through the first sector. Brings it down by almost a second through the second sector as well. So Andrea Montermini utterly charging here. All the while though, Paul Rosell is looking very, very comfortable for a GTS class victory. He would like to be on the overall race rostrum, but then so with Valour Courses Andrea Montermini. Montermini comes up under the rear spoiler then of the SMP Russian Bears Ferrari. They come down into the final turn, and this will start the penultimate lap of the race for them. And Montermini could well make this move by the time they hit the start and finish line. So through goes Montermini, his nose in front as he flashed past our commentary booth. And yes, he gains the position up into 3rd place then, Andrea Montermini. Absolutely astonishing performance from the very back of the grid. He did it in the first stint, had the long pit stop, done it all over again. Next time through. In terms of the scrap for the lead, by the way, that last lap I think was an aberration from Duncan Cameron. Here, Miguel Ramos, last time through, set exactly the same lap time to the nearest 10th of a second. So it's looking very comfortable for the AF Course Ferrari of Duncan Cameron. Matt Griffin, as we see, the switch then for the Gentleman Drivers Trophy, Alexander Tao Kanitsa Jr. has moved ahead of Dimitris Tverakos, and that is good enough for 7th position as well for Tao Kanitsa. Still though, Tverakos holds off Archie Hamilton, although the DriveX Porsche driver thinks about looking to the inside of Tverakos as they arrive into turn 5. In the meantime, Lorenzo Bontempelli is in a Bitec McLaren sandwich as he tries to do what he can to move around the outside of Luis Razzia. As they sprinted through turn 6, they arrive into the braking zone for turn 7 and 8. Still a Kessler Racing Ferrari, a little bit thwarted. He's got Giorgio Pantano on his tail as Archie Hamilton makes the move on Tverakos, so Archie Hamilton gains the position. And that is good enough for 7th then for Hamilton. As into the last lap of the race, heads the race leader, Duncan Cameron. And this has gone absolutely to plan for Duncan Cameron and Matt Griffin today. After the disappointment of yesterday, the disappointment of Paul Ricard, the upheaval of changing teams, the pace that they were showing in testing on Friday, in qualifying yesterday as well, has now been borne out by a superb performance, particularly from Griffin in the first half of the race. But Cameron hasn't put a wheel wrong, really, during his stint, and he has got over 10 seconds worth of advantage on Miguel Ramos heading into this final lap. So all he needs to do is keep the car pointing in the right direction, hope that nothing goes wrong, and he will score a maiden victory in the International GT Open. Of course, this is the time when the drivers are listening acutely to every gear change, every time they get on the brakes, listening for the engine note, hoping that nothing goes wrong in the car and everything holds together. But it's very, very rare to see any sort of failure on an AF course Ferrari. Duncan Cameron, as he heads into turn 10, is able to measure his pace, keep it nice and steady. Second position. It's going to be another very popular home result for Miguel Ramos, who will be leaving Portimao this weekend with a first and a second. That gives him and Nicky Pastorelli the real jump into the championship that they wanted after a quite literally pointless weekend at Paul Ricard, where they didn't trouble the score sheet. They're now getting themselves back underway with their championship charge. Also, 4 races into the year, it's the same for Matt Griffin and Duncan Cameron, as Cameron heads down into the last corner, accelerates out of it, up over the brow. The checker flag is ready and waiting, and it's going to be victory in the 4th race of the 2013 International GT Open for Duncan Cameron and Matt Griffin in the AF Course Ferrari. Second position goes to the V8 Racing Corvette of Miguel Ramos and Nicky Pastorelli. But then third place really has been one of the most remarkable drives, and that, provided he makes it through to the checker flag, and I'm sure he will go the way of the law, because it's Andrea Montermini. Here he comes, and Montermini gets huge celebrations from the entire pit wall. They all come out to applaud, as well they might, because that was a quite remarkable performance from Montermini. In 4th place and winning the GTS class has been Paul Rosell and Roman Mavlanov in the SMP Russian Bears Racing Ferrari. 5th has gone the way of the AF Course Ferrari of Matteo Beretta and Michael Lyons. 6th has been claimed by Alexander Taukanitsa Senior and Junior. 7th for Archie Hamilton and Nicolo Sciero. And 8th, and completing the GTS class podium, Dimitris Dverikos and Isaac Tutamulu. So Matt Griffin explaining his daughter just how successful today has been. He and Duncan Cameron claim the win then in the 4th round of the 2013 International GT Open. Well, from the sunshine of Portugal, we reconvene in 3 weeks' time, the first weekend of June, at the Nürburgring for races 5 and 6 of the season. A fortnight later, we will be in Jerez, and then on to Silverstone in mid-July, before we then head off for the summer break. And then when we reconvene after the summer break, we will be in Spa, followed by Monza, and the season finishing in Barcelona. So let's take a look then at the results from the 4th race of the year, with the victory for Duncan Cameron and Matt Griffin by 7.5 seconds from Miguel Ramos and Nicky Pastorelli. Andrea Montermini charging drive to the back of the grid to finish in 3rd. 4th, and winning the GTS class, Paul Rosell and Roman Mavlanov. 5th for Matteo Beretta and Michael Lyons. 6th for the Taukanitsas, 7th Archie Hamilton, Nicolo Sciero. Very solid result for them, given the difficulties they've had this weekend. In 8th and completing the GTS podium, Isaac Tutamulu and Dimitris Dverikos, with then Chris van der Drift and Luis Razia in 9th. Lorenzo Bontempelli and Nicola Di Marco completing the top 10 from Rafael Suzuki and Giorgio Pantano, Stefano Constantini and Alvaro Barber. Vladislav Maliv and Kirill Ladygin in 13th. Miguel Torrell and Jan Seyfarth, after that wretched disappointment with the puncture, eventually finishing in 14th. 15th goes to Johnny Larson and Daniel Zampieri. Marco Zanatini and Stefano Catuzzo claiming 16th, with Mario Cordoni and Joel Comathius in 17th. A race very, very low on retirements. Unfortunately, it was that early incident that removed Diedrich Schitthoff and also Cesar Campanico and Carlos Vieira. So what about the Drivers' Championship? Well, it's Andrea Montermini who now takes prime position at the top of the standings, with Luca Filippi not being here today and therefore not scoring points. Then it's the Taukanitsas who are next up, and Nicky Pastorelli and Miguel Ramos racing their way to 4th in the standings. It's coming to a halt in Part Ferme. Duncan Cameron. Yeah, of course, team ready and waiting, and then Andrea Montermini being applauded to a halt as well. I think we're going to have some very, very delighted drivers making their way up to the podium. There is the GTS class winning car. S&P Russian Bears car of Portugal and Roman Mavlanov, and they have had a fantastic weekend, and actually with an eye towards the races to come, you'd have to say that the Russian Bears Ferraris are rapidly becoming the one of the cars to beat at the front of the GTS class. So there is Montermini. Duncan Cameron can be rightly pleased with his day's work. He and Matt Griffin have managed the race to absolute perfection. I think they can all feel justified in having made that switch of teams to where, of course, it has produced a victory in their very first weekend of competition together. So Rosell just extricating himself from his helmet and hands device.
Well done. Thank you.
Duncan Cameron.
Not so bad, eh? You remember?
Beaming, unsurprisingly, and Miguel Ramos. Well, it wasn't quite the home double, but notwithstanding a first and a second place for he and Nicky Pastorelli will be immensely pleasing, particularly on a circuit which is so difficult for the Chevrolet Corvette, being such a undulating, busy track. And you can see that Ramos has really exerted himself behind the wheel, trying to chase down Duncan Cameron. He got within 7.5 seconds, but for another 10 minutes of race time, you'd say, well, he may have got on to terms, but it was the 50-minute race, so it was the victory for Matt Griffin and Duncan Cameron. Very happy drivers in Part Ferme. Of course, the Nürburgring in 3 weeks' time is a very different circuit for them to come, as we'll take a quick look then at some of the action from today. Again, on the rolling start, it looked as if it was Pastorelli who got the jump on Matt Griffin, but then Griffin in the red AF Corse Ferrari was able to brake fractionally later than Pastorelli, swooped around the outside of him and took the lead of the race, a lead that the car would not relinquish further back. It was spinning for Nicola Di Marco. Diedrich Schutthoff tapped into a spin where Carlos Vieira made contact. Also an early spinner was Michele Rugolo, who was assisted a little bit by Jackie Camp, as Andrea Montermini was the man to watch, charging up through the field. The Bitech McLarens always in the thick of the action all weekend. They've been right at the sharp end of GTS with plenty of scrapping. Montermini able to race his way up clear of Michael Lyons in pursuit of the leader of the GTS class, Jan Seyfarth, who was the leader until he caught a puncture, and that caused him problems. Into the pits then came Montermini, as at the very back end of the pit window, Matt Griffin, the race leader, came in to hand over to Duncan Cameron. After the pits, Montermini rejoined the action in 18th position and just got his head down and charged. There was a superb fight going on amongst the GTS class runners, which Montermini was able to scythe his way through, proving the lie that it's difficult to overtake here at the Portimao circuit. That was the move on Paul Rosell, which gave him third position with a couple of laps in the race remaining. It was Duncan Cameron and Matt Griffin in the AF Corse Ferrari who claimed their first win in the International GT Open from Miguel Ramos and Nicky Pastorelli, with Andrea Montermini completing the podium, and Paul Rosell and Roman Mavlanov, who claimed GTS class honours. Delight for Cameron as Montermini on to third place in the roster, Miguel Ramos and Nicky Pastorelli in second position. And then our race winners, Duncan Cameron and Matt Griffin. Delight for Andrea Montermini. Ramos and Pastorelli, very, very solid points haul for them going into the Nürburgring. Duncan Cameron and Matt Griffin enjoying the spoils of victory, as does their AF Corse team, who claimed their first win of the 2013 season. All smiles on the rostrum as they chorus the national anthems. Well, first there in the national anthem, we had a low-flying stunt pilot who came through and added to the jubilant atmosphere here on the rostrum in Portimao. It's been a super weekend of racing. As Montermini receives the handshakes and spoils. There is the stunt plane, which did a very, very low fly past between the grandstand and the paddock buildings here in Portimao. Second place trophies for Ramos and Pastorelli. And then the victory presentations with another fly past for Matt Griffin and Duncan Cameron. And the winning team, AF Course. This sets us up very, very nicely for the Nürburgring in 3 weeks' time. Who will prevail? Will it be the Corvette? Will it be the Ferrari? Or will it be somebody else entirely? We will see. Well, now the trophy presentation's complete. Montermini showing he's as quick with the champagne cork as he is on the track. He douses his rivals before Griffin and Cameron celebrate on the rostrum. And we take the opportunity to savour some super slow motion shots of the cars in action around the twists, turns and undulations here in Portimao. The Vodafone Corvette has been one of the stars of the weekend. Nicky Pastorelli and Miguel Ramos. For Ramos, very, very popular home result. The entire paddock willing him to do well this weekend. There's a lot of people here as well who've come to cheer on Ramos. But today they were bettered by the AF Course Ferrari of Duncan Cameron and Matt Griffin. And it was the second round of last year at the Nürburgring when the AF Course Ferrari claimed its first victory, the first of several en route to the eventual title. Very, very happy Isaac Tutumulu, waiting to be announced onto the GTS rostrum, because the action in the GTS class has been as exciting as we've seen in the Super GTs all weekend. So first of all, third place in the GTS class to Dimitris Verikos as Isaac Tutumulu. And again, their rostrum is going to be saluted by the performance of the stunt pilot. Tutumulu and Verikos in third. Second place in the GTS class, and another good result for AF Course, Matteo Beretta and Michael Lyons, with then victory in GTS for Paul Rosell and Roman Mavlanov. SMP Russian Bears drivers claiming their first win of the season in the GTS class. The Russian national anthem then in honour of SMP Russian Bears. Their team manager somewhat belatedly joins them on the rostrum as they get ready for the presentation of the trophies. First of all, then in third place to Isaac Tutumulu and Dimitris Verikos for Auto Orlando Sport Porsche. The second place trophies for Matteo Beretta and Michael Lyons in the AF Course Ferrari, and then SMP Russian Bears drivers Roman Mavlanov and Paul Rosell, who receive the winners' trophies, and SMP Russian Bears the winning team. So that almost brings us to the end of the second round of the 2013 International GT Open here at Portimao. Thank you very, very much for your company this weekend. I hope that you've enjoyed the action as much as I've enjoyed talking about it. So from myself, Ben Evans, here in Portimao, it's time to say goodbye, and we'll look forward to you joining us in 3 weeks' time at the Nürburgring.